Hello, it's Kim. I'm glad to be here with you today for whatever you guys want to talk about. I'm was running around, so I just threw on a sweater. I threw on a sweater. I mean, not that I was running around naked. I was wearing a different shirt and threw on a sweater. I did not do my makeup, so fresh faced Kim today. And I am here for the live, whatever you guys would like to talk about. So welcome to tonight's live. I am, what am I doing? I am ready to talk about anything. Clearly, I'm not ready. I'm like, what? What's happening? Get off my lawn. Anyway, perimenopause is fun. Yeah. So what was I working on today? I was working on some recipes, some video stuff, and some calculations, just boring stuff. I was super scattered, had to run some errands, meant to get some blood lab testing this week, and then hormonal changes happened, and I couldn't get the blood testing happening this week. I got to wait till next month because timing of everything is critical. And anywho, that's what I've been up to. A little chaos, just generally chaos. And wow, this is a chaotic intro. And so one of the things that I was looking at this week quite a bit was around omega-6 versus omega-3 testing. Has anyone ever heard about that, interested in that, has concerns about that? I'm happy to talk about it. I was doing some more kind of noodling, just honestly thinking about, we're like wrapping up the editorial stuff on the book. And it's like, is there something that we should have kept in the book or put in the book that we didn't put in? And I kept waffling on that topic. Is that something, I'm happy to hear from you guys if that's something that holds your interest or not. So omega-6, there's omega-6s and omega-3s are both examples of polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAs. And we often talk about just the omega-6s as the PUFAs. So people will say, oh, PUFAs are bad for you, but they include also omega-3s, which are essential. And they're both essential actually, but we really need the omega-3s. And so in modern Western society, we're very out of whack between the two PUFAs, the omega-6 and the omega-3. And generally speaking, you need some omega-6 for cell membranes, for skin health, hair health. It's sort of like a coating of things. And very non-specific term there. And so you need some, but you don't need a lot. And you certainly don't want more omega-6s than 3s beyond a certain point. And so they've done a bunch of studies. They've looked at heart disease risk. They've looked at autoimmune issues. So like as an example, people with rheumatoid arthritis, they did a study of, and they got their ratio of omega-3s and omega-6s. I think it was 2.5. So 2.5 as much omega-6s as omega-3s, which was they were people. So modern Western people are somewhere around like 1 to 20, 3 to 26, right? And so getting the omega-6 level down and the omega-3 level up until we hit around a 2.5 ratio. And when they got it in that kind of level or below in terms of the 6s, they found basically that a lot of the rheumatoid arthritis improved in this population. They've also found with the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio that can impact heart disease. So all sorts of things it's beneficial to. So anyway, that's just one of the things I was reading about more about. Like, I knew about the theories and the facts, but I was reading more about the studies. Kristen says, I watched a video today about the importance of protein and that people over 40 should eat high protein first thing in the morning to stop muscle atrophy. Can't remember the word, anabolic. You're probably talking about, you want to be anabolic, which is in the protein growth. Do I have an opinion on that? I do. I don't think it matters that you eat it first thing in the morning, but your first meal of the morning should be a higher protein meal. You need at least 30. Well, I would say younger people need at least 30. Older people, probably at least 40 grams of protein in that first meal of the day is is what's optimal to end. Probably what they said is to end your anabolic window is most likely what, to end your catabolic window. Did they say catabolic? So anabolic and catabolic are opposites. Anabolic is muscle building, catabolic is muscle breakdown. So they may have said, whoever you were talking, it might have been like Don Layman. They might have said something like to end your catabolic window, you want to have a high protein meal. That might have been the discussion. And so I don't disagree, is what I'll say. I do think people as we age need more protein. That's a well-documented fact. It kind of flies in the face of some conventional wisdom, which often said, well, when people get older, they don't need as much protein because they're not in, growth phases. Like kids need more protein. But in fact, kids have a lot of really great growth hormones that take over. So you can feed a youngin' almost anything and they're going to grow. I'm not saying you don't want to feed your children well, they definitely need protein. I'm not saying you can't, but like they can do a lot with a little. They know their body is producing the kinds of hormones that can take us very small amount of protein and do a lot of good stuff with it. When we're older, we're not producing those hormones anymore. So we need more clay to build our structure with, right? We need more substrate. We need that protein because we also have something called anabolic resistance as we age. And anabolic resistance essentially just means we need more protein to do what we used to be able to do with less protein. And so if your protein needs when you were younger were being met by let's say 1 gram per kilogram, now you might need 1.6 grams per kilogram. And there are studies on this that show that this is true. And so optimally, it's in an aging population, a minimum protein amount would be around 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of affected or essential body weight. So let's say, so you don't have to count the amount you're overweight, but let's say you're 5'5". And so kind of what's technically the minimum kind of appropriate weight is around maybe 125 for that person, right? Would be about so they may weigh 150, but really what they say optimal. I don't know. There's lots of words, but around there. So that person would want to say, okay, I'm 5'5", 125 is my optimal weight. I'm not saying you have to weigh that, but that's kind of, what they talk about. And so I'm going to eat 1.6 grams per kilogram of that weight. Now, obviously kilograms and pounds, you have to transfer. So so you just do a little math, you can do it there. But basically the range of appropriate protein for an older person, and by older, I mean mid 30s and older, not senior citizen. When you're out of the flush of youth, so if you transfer that from grams per pound, so that would be 1.2. No, sorry, 1.2. Hold on, I'm mathing. So yeah, so that would be anywhere from 5.5 grams per pound to 0.73 grams per pound. So 0.55 and 0.73. So that's the equivalent of 1.2 to 1.6. So somewhere between 0.55 and 0.73 grams per pound. So let's say that person says, okay, their optimal weight is 125. So I'd multiply that. And I usually aim for the high end. So times 0.73. So that person needs a minimum of around 91 grams of protein, right? So that's what you want. You want that minimum amount. If you think about that, right? And I know that Don Layman, who's a protein researcher, would say this, that their studies show that it's very important to get a good dose of protein in the morning for your first meal when you're breaking your fast. Like I said, it isn't so important that you get up at 6 a.m. and you do it right away. But that first meal, you want to be in a good amount of protein. And then before you go to, not like right, but your last meal before you enter your fasting period, before you get ready for bed, you also want a good dose of protein in that meal. So, and by a good dose, it's a minimum of 30 grams. Sometimes better to be more like 40 grams. So that would mean, that kind of at a minimum, somebody might be doing 3 meals a day with 30, 30, 30. Don has argued that they don't know about that middle meal. That, is it as essential to get the full 30 grams in that middle meal? If you're trying to build muscle, if you're lifting weights, you probably want to bump that up to maybe more like 40 grams 3 times a day than 30 grams 3 times a day for that smallish woman. I know some of you don't think a 5'5" woman is small, but I do. I would say almost any person should probably get at least 30 grams of protein in each meal. If there's one meal you're going to skimp on, that mid meal, it looks like that might not be as important in protein, but I would rather err on the side of caution there. But definitely in your morning and your evening meals, and if you only eat 2 times a day, then you only eat 2 times a day. But in your morning and your evening meals, getting at least 30 to 40 grams of protein in that meal. If you're a bigger, stronger, more muscular person, those numbers are going to bump up. So let's say you're a smallish woman who doesn't lift a lot of weights, but you want to be healthy and you stay active because it's good for you and you should lift weights. But, they're going to maybe in their breakfast, they're going to have enough that they're 30 to 40 grams of protein there. And they're going to make sure they get 30 to 40 grams of protein in the evening. And then at lunch, they could, have a salad and maybe there's a little protein in there, but maybe it doesn't matter as much. But then as you get to be a bigger person with more muscle mass to support, with not bigger with more body fat, but like taller or more muscular, or lifts a lot of weights or is very active, then you're going to bump that up. So you're going to get maybe 30 to 40 3 times a day grams. Then, you're even bigger. Now you're up to like 40 to 50 grams or, so you're just kind of like scaling up to the size of the person. But even a little shorty should be getting close to 30 grams a meal, maybe a little, like they could probably get away with maybe a little less, like I said, at the midday meal. Hopefully this is not too confusing for people, but you do need protein. As you age, you need protein. So our bones are made with protein. Our muscles are made with protein. Our skin, our hair, our nails, every cell in your body needs protein. You cannot support yourself properly without getting protein in your diet. So I'll tell you guys that recently my mother finally listened to me about eating some more protein in her diet. And you know what happened? She's lost 4 pounds. Her bloating is gone and she feels better. So like, yay, right? And so protein is very important. And we can think we don't need it. We can think we don't want it. We can think we don't crave it. But it is, and I get it too. If I had a plate of chocolate chip cookies and a plate of chicken breasts, I want the chocolate chip cookies. But you got to get it in your, and it doesn't have to be chicken breast. I'm just saying, I was giving examples of extremes. But a healthy diet is a protein-based one. And animal protein is your best bet for that. So, that's something that I even as I eat more carbs than I used to, that kind of thing, it's protein first. Protein and animal-based foods have to be really, I believe, the basis of a healthy diet in almost all cases. Are there circumstances where somebody who eats more of a vegetarian diet can manage to be healthy? For sure. With very careful monitoring. It's also impossible for people to live without very careful things at the North Pole, but they can manage to do it if they're very careful, right? So like human bodies are amazingly adaptable to a variety of conditions. But the more they stray from sort of the central way that humans were meant to live, I think, or were, not meant to, but like we evolved to live, then the more accommodations you're going to have to make, the more supplements you're going to have to take, the more workarounds you're going to have to do, the more carefully you're going to have to balance things. And I remember I was a vegetarian for several years when I was a teenager because it was trendy. And, I was like, okay, I got to get the beans and the rice and this and that, right? You got to really balance things out in a way. Kind of don't have to when you eat a more ancestrally appropriate diet. So that's That's where I stand on that matter. I'm not against anything that works for any people. I'm just suggesting that we have to, monitor ourselves more carefully the more we drift into uncharted waters or less appropriate for our biology. Anyway, any other questions today? I'm happy to answer them. It's kind of a slow day. Thank you, Kristen, for the questions, though. I hope that I answered your questions in a way that gave you the information that you needed. All right, guys. Well, if that's what we got, then we'll wrap it up for the day. I hope everyone has a fabulous week. It is April 1st. It's April Fool's Day. And this was not meant as a joke. I hate April Fool's Day jokes, by the way. So I'm glad I avoided most of them. And I will see you tomorrow I won't see you tomorrow necessarily, but I'll be around tomorrow if you want to come see me. All right. Bye, guys.